I'm Evelyn Culp, interviewing her.
Welcome to Evie's History Bites, hosted by Martha Owen, the Heritage Collection Manager of the ELC Heritage Collection. Welcome to another episode of Evie's History Bites. I'm Martha, your host, and we have another great episode for you. I have Dr. Mark Hutsell as a guest this month to talk about the practice of chiropractic. But before we get to him, let's have a little history lesson. Did you know that Nappanee had a chiropractic table company for 45 years? Doctors Elif and Bernice Widmoyer graduated from Chiropractic College in 1921 and had practices in Buchanan and Benton Harbor areas for 17 years before coming back to Nappanee and opening a practice. LF became bored with his profession and took a challenge of building a comfortable adjusting table for the chiropractic profession. Even though he never pursued a patent, LF had invented the first headlight dimmer switch on an automobile. So along with his wife Bernice, they started the Relaxo products in their basement in 1944. They started with a pad which fit over existing cushions on the only adjusting table that was being manufactured at the time. It was so well received that they decided to design their own table, incorporating the same cushion design. They had some growing pains and had to build a new office and factory at 754 North Main Street. And the wood frames for the stationary tables at one time were assembled at Muchler's. As the business continued to grow, the Widmoyers purchased LF's father's slaughterhouse at 852 North Main Street. They added 3 additions onto it, and the Widmoyers had the first electric hydraulic adjusting table in the world. Relaxo tables sold to every state in the United States and in 7 countries as well. Those countries included Ireland, Africa, Canada, Switzerland, France, Holland, and England. The Widmoyers' daughter, Billie Jean, and her husband, Gutch Pippin, purchased the company in 1970, and they operated it until 1989. Dr. Mark Hutsell sat down with me and we talked about chiropractic. All right, so thank you so much, Dr. Hutsell, for sitting down with me. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Martha. It's a pleasure. I'm Mark Hutsell. I've grown up in this area my whole life. I graduated from Elkhart Memorial High School. Going back further, my family came out of Arkansas as cotton pickers and out of Montana as coal miners and copper and loggers. So kind of a different lifestyle from my background, but I've been married 31 years and have 4 children. I'm very fortunate to have a great relationship with everybody there, and my children have, in the last couple of years, joined me in my practice, which has just been really awesome to have that collaboration. They're very gifted, and we have a lot of fun working together. I've been practicing chiropractic in Nappanee for 41 years, and been at the place where I'm at right now on 301 North Main. That was Dr. Snyder's. He'd been there 23 years. I think before that, there was that building was built to be a chiropractic office, but I think before that, there was a medical doctor in a different building in that area. But I've shared this experience with other chiropractors in this area and friends throughout the Elkhart County Chiropractic Association. And had good mentors along the way. Maybe we'll talk about those along the way that have influenced me. But I like to do all kinds of things. I'm an avid learner, and I think that's what I enjoy a lot about what I do. Is it challenges me to continually try to learn and try to be better. And I like to play music. I just spent a couple weeks ago at a music camp for the week, which was a restoration of my soul, just to have a week where you're around musicians and you get to play and learn so enjoy water things and enjoy playing games and having fun with my family and things like that. So
Nice. So, why did you decide to become a chiropractor, or who influenced you to become a chiropractor?
yeah, well, this goes back a while. I remember, like, in a social studies assignment in 7th grade, that we had to pick out a career and kind of explore it. And I happened to be with my mother at a chiropractor's, and I thought that was really interesting. Chiropractic had been an influence in our lives. My mother, who had been very sick and without any resolution, any answers until she got into things like chiropractic and her diet. There was no solution for her health problems. And so at this chiropractor's office, who is kind of a dad to me in chiropractic, but he had a thing on his wall that told the requirements to become a chiropractor. And in 7th grade, I remember seeing that, and I thought, oh my goodness, all those years of study and all that biology and physics and chemistry, and I thought, at 7th grade, I thought, no way could I do that. And so that kind of just faded off in my mind. And as I went through school and I was trying to pursue what I wanted my platform to be, something that I could change the world on, have my effect. I mean, the way we were raised is that whatever we did it unto God, not unto man, but we served God by serving man. And I wanted to do it well, and I wanted to be an output of ministry. And so, and I had experienced as a kid, and as I grew up, I experienced these encounters where people would be changed when I was around them, and they would say, I had a headache, but when you touched me, that headache went away. And this happened a few times, and I thought, oh, that's really interesting. I said, it's not something I intended to do or set out to do, and I always felt like to have the ministry of where you could change people's life, and I felt like something was in my hands to do, so that went that way. As I progressed and went to school for, just in generalities and really praying about what to do, I was going to go into physical therapy, and I went to the hospital, Elkhart General Hospital. I said, hey, do you have a position available that I could just be around and job shadow? And they said, well, we have this thing we'd like to do. And it was like a part-time temporary thing where they actually trained me to do things, and I fulfilled a role. And part-time temporary meant that when people were on vacations, I got to cover for them, or on weekends, or those odd calls. And so I had this great honor to have great people that taught me things and kind of schooled me in things like massages and ultrasounds and working with wounds and helping people with strokes. And so that was a great thing. And I felt that was the way I was going to go, was physical therapy. And when I first applied and I didn't get in, I thought, oh my goodness, what do I do now? And sometimes that happens, and so I just really started thinking about it, and it's just like that the idea of chiropractic came back to my mind, and I felt like the hospital experience was a really good experience for me, but I also felt like there was limitations of what you could express in yourself that you felt is in the way of physical therapy. I felt like that was a little restricted in what the potentials that I could do or would like to do. So I looked at chiropractic, and that just opened up for me. And it just felt like when I got into that, it felt like this is where I'm supposed to be. And I remember sitting in those first classes and really just feeling like, well, there's a scripture in the Bible that says the steps of a good man are ordered. And I just felt like, it's really interesting to feel like you're just right where you're supposed to be, wherever that is for you or me. And so I remember that sense of just everything I was hearing was what I felt like I was to fulfill in my life and to learn about. And it's been kind of like that it's been a lifelong process of learning. I mean, I think all of us can say that our schooling was important, but we really learn a lot when we get out and work with people in the real world. And that's where the real education starts. So I learned a lot of stuff. I keep learning, it just feels like it's never ending, and there's just so many avenues that you almost have to kind of find a niche a little bit and just keep exploring, because it just keeps opening up. There's just a lot about our bodies. It says in the scripture too, it says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and that, of course, that never goes out of date. That will always be true, that this is such a fascinating body that we live in, and just full of things. I mean, if you think, yes, we are physical, but we also have a mind, and we also have a spirit, so there's all these things interacting, and they all matter.
Yeah. So can you just tell us a little bit about your practice? I know that you've been here for 41 years, but how has your practice kind of evolved?
Yeah. When I got into chiropractic and I started, I'll tell you a couple stories that, I just felt like if I could just help somebody, and I remember, I can tell you the names, I won't, but that were some of my first people that I took care of. And they came in, and one lady, she had headaches for 25 years every day. And I remember being able to work with her, and when she came back, she hadn't had any headaches since we took care of her, and that was the first time in 25 years. So she referred her cousin who had headaches every day for 30 years. And so we had that same experience. We took care of her, and she didn't have any headaches. And I thought, oh, this is pretty amazing that this would happen. Now, I've had headaches also for one reason or another that didn't go away like that. But I'm just saying, when you just start off and you see that, and I was thinking the adjustment was going to be that we delivered, and that release of the potential of the body, which there's more and more studies about that, even in the last 41 years, would be all there was to it. But I really recognized that there was several factors. And if you go back to the very originator of chiropractic, I mean, he talked about the causes of problems, the causes of disease that had to do with thoughts, toxins, and traumas. So you had the body, you had the mind, and also you had the toxins. And so we recognized that we had to satisfy the body with nutrition, and that sometimes and we recognize it every day. I hear these stories every day, that people are full of inflammation, and sometimes if you look at labels and if you follow food sensitivities, these things can generate inflammation in a body. And so sometimes like somebody I saw today, just as an example, their medicines that they were taking were hurting their kidneys, so they had to be taken off these medicines. And fortunately, they were learning that also they had to lose weight, and in the process of losing weight, they had to be taken off foods that were very inflammatory towards their body. So it was a good timing that they could decrease their inflammatory load on their body that was part of their pain problem, and then also didn't kill their kidneys like the medications that we're doing. So you see these ideas that people are fueling inflammation. I have a funny story about somebody that had come in and their back was just really in a lot of pain, and one of my assistants was just inquiring about their day and what they were doing, and their habit was to eat 6 donuts a day.
Oh my goodness.
In the morning. And she said, that fuels an inflammation in your body, so that could be a factor in your health. And he didn't know that. So anyways, it's funny, he was telling me the story where he had his cat on his tummy, and he was talking to his cat, and he says, should I eat this donut? And the cat shook its head no. And then he said, should I go see Dr. Hutsell today? And the cat shook its head yes. And I said, okay, you need to listen to that cat. And that cat was a funny thing. But yeah, I think a lot of people, we don't recognize that things we put in our body as fuel. And if you look at labels anymore, and you should be looking at labels, that there's so much things that aren't food. And so these foods that we are taking in as food-like substances, they're more needful to be detoxed than to be digested. And so we really need to look at our food. Well, so going back to your question, the evolution, is that we started just seeing the process of how foods affected people's pain in their body and patterns. And so we also, early on, we did blood work on people to see, if we could help them, naturally, and if their blood work revealed things. And so we found that a lot of times you had people that were very not feeling well, but they had good blood work. So I think an evolution of that was just saying, okay, we got to find this at a different level or something. So I think we started evolving into like how you could check the acupuncture points, check the body energetically, get feedback from the body. I mean, that was always important to me, to have integrity with what we're doing, to make sure we're making a change and meeting the person where they're at. So when you meet a person and they have a problem, I mean, there could be like layers of issues concerning that problem. And some of them can be like we mentioned about structural, and some of them can be like foods and toxins and are bad, not foods that are nourishing. And some of them can be thoughts and emotions. And so all these became very relevant to like when we saw a person, we tried to see them as a whole person, and not for me to fit their agenda, but for me to kind of figure out, okay, where do we intervene in their lives to upgrade them to be their best selves, and take them on a bit of a journey of like restoring and reliving and expressing good health. So along the way, I think we kept learning things, kept learning how the integration of the body and how the mind, the brain, how it affects, Spurrier was a Nobel Peace Prize laureate who said that 90% of our brain energy comes out of the movements of our body. So, I mean, whenever you can restore movement, and if you whenever you can restore movement to the body, you help the brain. And if you ever get into the books like on trauma by Peter Levine, or The Body Keeps the Score by, I think it's Bulk. Anyways, these things will say oftentimes how the interventions to help our traumas are through our body. So we just see this integration, that we're just not divided. And that's one of the things about chiropractic, is that it's a word called vitalism, where it's all inclusive about how each thing can affect the other, not reductionist or mechanist like is much part of the allopathic model, but you're looking at something that how does that emotion affect you? And this is amazing to me. I mean, things that you can work really hard on, and you can see them resolved, and you say, well, what happened? And they say, well, I gave forgiveness to somebody that I had an offense with. And I said, wow, your body's totally different, and so you can be looking at these patterns that are really strong, and yet some of them can be more in the area of like your thoughts and emotions and your foods. And so I think that's become our model, and then resetting the brain to accept the body and to work with it in an appropriate way. I think that's become really important to us. And but just really an integrative kind of idea about our body is so complex, and yet so simple that, I mean, if you let it do its thing, there's this innate process that we all have that just seems to work. And like if you have a cut or something, all the things that come into that to help your immune system, to help that heal, it's just all these processes that we take for granted are just so overwhelmingly complex, and they just happen, and we don't have to think of it, and that's why they call it like your autonomic system, your autonomic nervous system. Ultimately everything is controlled and regulated by that. So another part of the evolution, as we talked about, is just that integration. If you look at the works of Peter Porges and the polyvagal theory, the big part of our nervous system, the idea that when we feel trust and we feel safe, we can heal. But if we don't have that, we can't heal. And so that's a big thing in our day, where even our brain is changing, because a lot of people stay in fear, or what we call like sympathetic dominance, which is what fight or flight. And so we see a lot of people that just live in fight or flight. Maybe it's generated by not realities of what's happening, but maybe it's news, or maybe it's things in your mind, how you can get overwhelmed. And that's a term we hear a lot about, people being overwhelmed.
Yeah.
That's a common thing. So to bring people in a place where they're safe in their body, they're comfortable, they have trust, and that's a kind of a new model of it. This whole thing about if you don't have those things, it's hard for you to be well and to express wellness and happiness. But it's a lot of the news and media want to bring us into fear, and it's generated for myself. And I think for everybody, really, our souls aren't designed to take in all that negativity. And so really there's times I've had to fast from the news, just take, it's not that I didn't care.
Yeah.
But it's just my heart couldn't carry all that. And I really think that even as we're disciples of the internet and how we're so driven by that, I think it just brings us into a place where there's not a safe place or a quiet place of refuge and recovery. And if you go back not long ago when we didn't have those things, or if you even go back 100, 200 years and you hear writings of the people that they were concerned about the busyness of the time because of how it affected their soul and their bodies.
Yeah.
And so of course we've evolved into just rapidly, exponentially into where there's so much going on in our environments and in our lives that I don't think any of us were designed to carry all that. So, but all that matters, and I think we have to find places of safety and trust and relationship and communion with one another that helps us restore our bodies, souls, and minds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you do think of a chiropractor, you think of crack, snapple, pop almost of adjusting people, but you're more into also figuring out how to keep people adjusted.
I think it's really interesting that when you go back to one of the pioneers of chiropractic, B.J. Palmer, he said, don't ever make an adjustment until you know why it happened and what's the cause of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that gives you such a respect for the body. Why is it manifesting a pattern? Why is this pain there? And I think even in our own personal lives, we have to say, when we encounter things, we have to take a minute and say, what's behind that?
Yeah.
And oftentimes our bodies are intelligent enough that sometimes we get a premonition we just had an encounter, and with that encounter there was a lot of chemistry that was generated in our body. Mm-hmm. Or we just had an encounter with something that we smelled that was very toxic to us. So I think our body can give us a lot of information, especially if we take a minute and think about it. But I mean, just to think that somebody said, don't do anything until you know why that happened, that there was something, what's behind that? And I think in our lives we have to kind of step back and say, even with our feelings and the things, why am I sick? Why do I feel this way?
Yeah.
Why do I have these thoughts and these emotions and these pains? And what's behind that? And sometimes there's layers. Sometimes people figure this out and they work through the layers. There's a discipline called theophostics where people kind of pray through these things. And sometimes when they pray through these ideas that have come into their mind about it, that are layers of a problem, those problems start going away, but they're wrapped into something that has come along our path and we didn't process well or entirely. I just lost my sister last year, and one of the things, the books we read to try to help was how important it is that you process these things. And I thought, bingo, there's so much to that idea, because how much of life do we not process? I mean, do we just subdue it, or we just squelch it down to go on? And do the next thing. And so these are things sometimes that what they say, buried emotions don't die, I mean they're still alive and active, and we have to deal with those. And so there's a lot to our bodies that we need to be a little more thoughtful about, and think about our thinking and think about why we're where we're at. And I think when we do it, there'll be revelations about this great body and why it's not manifesting good health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been to a chiropractor before, and they've done x-rays before, and then they'll my neck was actually, instead of going how it's supposed to, it was going in, and they're like, oh, you look down a lot, don't you? It's right. Oh, I never thought that looking down would affect my neck that much.
Yeah, well, I've seen carpenters as an instance, and if you looked at their hands, their fingers were going at a 45-degree angle from hammering. Now today we got all the the automated stuff, the air compression. But yeah, your body molds to what you do, and of course nowadays, what you're referring to is like technique, and when you look at people's posture, it's definitely changing. And if you look at a great TED talk is Amy McCuddy, and it's really talking about how our posture affects our physiology. And of course, we know that if you affect a person's posture, like in school, you affect their grades and their attitude. And so it's unfortunate that the technique is something that brings us into such a poor, slouching posture. And of course, the more we do that, the more we reduce the vitality of our nervous system. And like you said, in your neck, sometimes that's like the arc of life. They say sometimes when you've lost that curve, you've lost some of the vitality, and you've compressed some of the way that your body communicates with your brain, with your body. So these are important. So the day we live in, we need to be doing probably things, exercises. One of the things I do, and I was aware of this early on in my career, that I was leaning forward in my head posture, and I was a chiropractor, and so I had to learn things and be adjusted, but sometimes just standing against a wall, bring your head and shoulders back. Sometimes we talk about doing snow angels on the wall, because so much of our life is drawn us forward, and gravity's like 24/7.
Yeah.
So we do have to do things to counter that, and so but our culture has just really got us into the phone and pushing. So we're bent into a bad posture a lot.
Yeah. So I don't know if you know this, but the Widmoyers, they were chiropractors once upon a time back in the day here in Nappanee, and they created the Relaxo chiropractor table and sold it out of here of Nappanee, which it's very, very bulky. But how has like the chiropractor table evolved as well?
Yeah, hey, you give me goosebumps, because I love these people, the Widmoyers.
Yeah.
And I could tell you some stories. I probably should tell you some stories, because the Widmoyers, my body's just tingling thinking about this heritage of the Widmoyers, and they had a daughter, Billy Pippin, and we loved her very much. She worked with us, and she would just say, "Oh," she said, "it feels so good when I hear the Relaxo table going." I have a couple of them at least in my office. I might have some elsewhere in my place. But the Widmoyers were great pioneers and created a table that a lot of chiropractors use nationwide. So Billy and her husband Gutch, they went all over the country representing the Widmoyer table, the Relaxo, as you talked about it. And it was right behind Thompson's funeral home where they made it. Great people. And one of the stories I love about this, because one of my best friends and mentors, somebody that stood up for my wedding, was Dr. Smith, Dr. A.B. Smith. I think they call it the Haviland Center. It's right at Beardsley and Main Street. They turned it into a museum, but that used to be his office.
Okay.
And Dr. Smith was 99 years old when he retired from chiropractic. And he just said at 99, he says, "Mark," he said, "I'm just not enjoying it anymore. I think I'm gonna retire." But getting back to the table, Dr. Smith and the Widmoyers were hanging out, and Dr. Smith said, "You need to put a motor on those tables that will make it go from a laying down table to a standing table and help people transition." And so that was the first time that ever happened, where a chiropractic table was designed so a person could walk right in, lay on it, and it takes them down. And we've enjoyed that. We know there's people that really struggle in that up and down, and so we have several of those to accommodate people in their transitions. And but I love that Dr. Smith had a part in that. And so I don't know the years. It was during my years here that they were making that table, and then somebody bought them out of Fort Wayne, and then I think they became a part of I can't think of the name now, but it's a supplier that bought the Relaxo. So I don't know where it's at right now, but it was a great thing, and it was to think they made that in Nappanee, and it went all around the country, probably all around the world, really, if I know the truth.
Yeah, we have one here.
Yeah.
So we got it out of Dr. Denginger's office.
Nice.
So, yeah, I may have had to I will confess I may have had to pay the street department in donuts after they had to move it.
Right.
But getting here wasn't a small feat. Those things
Right.
are heavy.
Right.
So
Yeah, we moved them around, and there used to be some leftover people that worked at Relaxo. Then we'd call them in, they'd fix the table, and they're no longer around. So we miss them. But there's people out there mechanically inclined that can work with the hydraulics and things and keep them going. And
wow. All right. So can you explain some of the different chiropractic methods that are out there?
yeah, well, you mentioned about the cracking and popping, and that's real popular. And you're right. A lot of people don't know, and they think that's chiropractic, but that's one form of chiropractic. And there's people that specialize just in like upper cervical, like just the atlas. That's all they'll do. There's people that specialize just in cranial. Let me just as a side note, just if you like upper cervical, your whole body is monitored through the cerebellum, and at that brainstem area, that's a real sensitive area that can be influenced. And not only can it affect many things, including your low back, but I even brought a study that they did. A friend of mine, Dr. Marshall Dickholtz out of Chicago, was involved in a study with Rush University, and they were doing a study about how this upper cervical consistently and predictively brought people off of blood pressure medication.
Wow.
So there's actually was a documentary on PBS, and I brought the study with me, but anyways, it was just saying that this adjustment, and these doctors out of Rush University, the medical doctors were thinking, how does this work, that he makes this adjustment? And so they did work on it, and it was quite a study. So anyways, so some of these things to the listener might sound really far out, that an atlas can affect that, but I mean, you're dealing with the brain and the cerebellum, and the ramifications are far and wide. So people specialize sometimes in cranial things, extremities. There's adjustments that are like mechanical, using drop pieces on a table. Maybe your Relaxo has that. Some people that they drop and they create a start, a stop and a start, where you're just kind of trying to reset the body. There's like you mentioned, the manual things. There's in my time, like there's instruments that adjust like an activator, or there's mechanical things. And I think there's receptor-based ideas about like how things go out in your body, but ultimately any of those things, it's like trying to reset them to the brain. So you're not just doing the body like a part, you're actually integrating it to something. And furthermore, I would just like to express that I think it was I just wrote this down too. Let me see if I can tell you. It's 1921, they did a Windsor study where they were doing autopsies on people, cats, dogs, and they found that whatever they died from was influenced by the vertebra that fed that organ or that area. So it was kind of like saying, okay, they died from like a kidney, and then when they went to the area that fed the kidney from the spine, that area was like affected. Those nerves weren't healthy and hadn't been working well. So it was an interesting thing that in the vitality of our body, that optimum nerve expression was a very big important thing. So that's one of our missions, is to make sure we have maximum nerve integrity and optimum nerve expression, expressing our full genetic potential. But those studies that were done way back that kind of linked our spine to those conditions, and then but also there's all kinds of ways to adjust. Let me get back to that thing. Yes, and some people like the Nemo's techniques and toughness. They were energetically based. They were going to receptors in muscles to correct things. Then there was a guy named Dr. George Goodhart, and he was connecting acupuncture areas to muscles, and these muscles then to organs, and just applied kinesiology, which is just fascinating, that you could get input about your whole body and this whole integration through testing and energetic work. So that's the kind of path that we kind of got excited about, because it just felt like you really get the feedback from the body instantaneously. But well, is any more on that course? I bet there's probably 100 different techniques. That is true, and I would say that they probably all have some common threads, that they use the body to affect the brain, and I think that's one of the biggest things in my 40 years, is how the brain has become at the forefront of how it connects. And of course, when I think it was during President Clinton's, they declared a decade of the brain, and then the next decade they declared the decade of the gut brain, because they recognized that the brain was so affected by the gut, and the enteric nervous system of the gut was such an important part of our personality and our expression. And oh my goodness, you remember we shared some of these stories in our library time, but I mean, how people could take feces from a mouse, a cat, and put it in a mouse, and the mouse would start liking the cat. And that when people talk about doing fecal transplants and things, how they take on personalities of the donor, just like a heart recipient or transplant recipient takes on characteristics and desires and taste and the things that the donor had. But just this integration of how in our cells, how they communicate to our body, and then they communicate even beyond that when we have a donor or a fecal transplant or something like that. But so the brain, the body, the gut, just this totally amazing integration.
Yeah, and does the study of like reflexology as well with the feet, like does that kind of blend in with the world of chiropractic?
Well, I would say this, I think it's very energetic based, so I would say, when you look at acupuncture and chiropractic, I think you're dealing with a lot of energetic things. And all this stuff that we're talking about, let me say first of all, like your feet, your hands, your ears, your eyes, they're all holograms of the whole big picture. So if you've ever seen a diagram of your hands and the reflexes, or your ears, your eyes, they all represent like the whole body. Your face, I mean, your face can be broken down and tell on you, and the creases that you have, your fingernails, your tongue, it's all a hologram that represents your whole body. And people have, through thousands of years, and going back to Eastern medicine, and that we've totally dismissed, but all that stuff is showing that all these things, like you're saying, foot reflexology, is a hologram of our whole body, and very revealing. And so, that is amazing. But I want to say this at this point. It's in 1910, the Carnegies and Rockefellers started to organize medicine, and so this is why we have some of the policies we have healthcare wise. But they totally got rid of anything that had to do with energy, homeopathic, acupuncture, chiropractic. They dismissed it. And even there's people, even today you can go to the TED Talk and you can see where a person takes a cancer cell and exposes it to a frequency that blows it up. Well, they were doing that back in the 20s. They were dealing with cancers with frequencies. But those places that were like that, those offices were raided, and those machines were crushed. And there were great thinkers. I could name several. I think Royal Lee, he had hundreds of patents to his name, just a brilliant man, and came up with the idea of concentrated food things to help our health, not synthetic things, but foods that are grown in a garden that are condensed to a concentrated pill. Or if you go back to Weston Price, that talked about that even degeneration in our bodies, our first signs are like cavities in our teeth. And so he traveled the world and found when they adopted the standard American diet, that they started getting the standard American diseases as well. And they found people that had great teeth that didn't brush them, but didn't eat the way we ate. But when they did adopt that, then even twin brothers, like that looked the same, when they adopted a different diet, their bone structure would change, their mouth would change, their teeth would change. And so these old guys that were dismissed were saying that what we're eating has something to do with how we're becoming. And they were like ringing the bell a long time ago, back in the 30s. But the Flexner report, which guided a lot of the funding for education and dismissed anything that was energetic or holistic. So that's been the model that we've lived under, and we've been educated under, and that's why a lot of people have biases against anything alternative. I've seen people really get offended by anything that would be different than medicine and drugs. We are 4% of the world's population in the United States. We use 70% of the medications, and probably higher as far as opioids. And of course, we know the opioid crisis we just are coming through. It's been a mess, and it's embarrassing. But that they would dismiss anything that was different than that. And so we've been under that model. When I was in school, I'm trying to think, they had the name of it, the Wilkes trial. They did an antitrust suit against the American Medical Association that I think was finally resolved around 84, and they won the trial. But there was a million pieces of evidence and how the plan they had to exterminate and put down and ridicule chiropractic. And it's just a shame how people have picked up on the other part, and that they dismiss anything that's like that. But the damage has been done. The cast was set, the mold was set, and even though they won that suit, and the money that was there was minuscule compared to the damage that's been done and continues to be done and propagated. And it's a great hope of ours that this whole Make America Healthy Again movement, I hope, I think it's exposing some of these things that they said, yes, follow the science, but make it real science. Don't make it based on things that greed and just pat a pocket. Because there's lots of books and material about this, about how much of our research has been obscured by greed and by politics, and it was to it had a motive behind it that wasn't true. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so we could go into things that are unspeakable. We can't talk about these things, but because they'll shut you down. But there's so many things that weren't based on real good science, and if they go back and do that right, then they'll expose, and then maybe there'll be some balance to it. But like we know, our foods have been hijacked, and so I said most of the foods that we eat, and with the things that are on the labels, most of them are like things that need to be detoxed, not digested. Where did that happen? And a lot of these things that are so common to our repertoire of our agriculture, our food, it's illegal in other nations. So you think about a mom that has to go to Germany to get food that's not been tainted with genetically modified materials or something that a baby might react to. And so, the overwhelm to find foods that will help a baby to mature and not have problems that are epidemic now. Think about that. The things that used not to be now are like epidemics. And here again, I think we haven't really thought, well, why is that? We haven't thought behind. And there are some rogue people that are stepping out and writing beautiful books and exposing and saying, we've got to get behind this epidemic of heart disease and neurological problems. And a lot of them are coming back to, we've got to feed our bodies better, and we've got to reduce the amount of stress. But I think about William Davis on Wheat Belly, and he's written a book about the gut. And Perlmutter is a neurologist who have been just stepped out of this and said, hey, we got to figure this. Our country, think about country, it was all over the place. But they stepped out and said, hey, what's going on that we're treating problems that, and if you think about this, that the ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Events study, that we're saying that kids and adults, nearly everything that's a chronic disease can be related back to an adverse child event. And so there's a neurologist who also has a TED Talk that speaks about this and just says, as a pediatrician, that they're treating all these kids with problems, but look at sometimes the environment. We think about getting a second chance, and some kids haven't had first chances, And so a lot of people have had issues in their childhood that have never been processed or dealt with, like we talked earlier, that have been part of an epidemic of autoimmune and all kinds of epidemics that we deal with, that we think we shrug shoulders and as to why is this all happening. But the ACE study, which was done by an insurance company and the CDC, said almost 100% correlation in adult diseases that went back to childhood, adverse childhood events. So
Yeah. And I have a 9-month-old at home, and at his last doctor's appointment, we were going through what his 12-month appointment would look like, and they were like, "Oh, we're gonna test him for lead," and I was like, "Why do we test him for lead?" So I did some research on my own and figuring out that some brands of baby food contain lead, and so it's just like, well, I know that he doesn't get this one, he doesn't get this one, like.
it's a minefield, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you should have to find that out on your own. But yeah, it's a shame that we can't trust. Well, we should be able to trust, and that's what I hope we get back to. That it's going to be a shift, but I think that people there has to be good stuff in our foods, especially in our kids. But think about, like, if you took an umbilical cord, I think there's like 90 some different chemicals that are in that. I mean, we're not even talking about people that are cocaine babies or fetal alcohol. I mean, we're talking about just people that are exposed to things and what's in that cord.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yes, our kids are not getting a good start, and we're in a generation now that we're not as healthy. I mean, some of the doctors I listen to that are writing books, I'm trying to think of the one that just was about seed oils, but it was just saying she noticed that the kids were sicker than the parents. And that, how could that be? You think we need to be better.
Yeah.
we need to leave the world better than we found it. And that's one of the things I'm just challenged by. I mean, that's been my thought, but boy, I mean, we got to get ahead of some of these things. But our things that we're talking about are actually creating a sicker group of children, and we don't want that. We're losing them, and mentally, physically, and there's things that and it's not their fault, but we need to, as responsible adults, help figure that out. And it may not be popular, but it may be very necessary. And even though it's a right thing, it may not be the easy thing. But you watching people that have went through their own detoxification from drugs, and then when they are adults and maybe they've cleared addictions, and then they try to clear their kids' diet, they said, I recognize that because that was me when I was going through my withdrawal, when they started to clean up the kids' diets. And so it's, the tobacco companies bought the food companies when they had all that time of when they were coming down on tobacco and the advertising, then they took the ads out and stuff like that. By the way, I think ours is one of only, there might be 2 countries that receive advertisements for pharmaceuticals. And I think the results demonstrate it. We take a lot more medications in most countries. But these things are kind of programmed into us. And I kind of lost a little of the direction I was going there. But we have to, the idea that these foods that have actually been designed to be addictive, and they don't do that anymore, but they used to advertise you can't eat one, it's just revealing the hand. We've made it such that it lights up a part of your brain that makes you want more and more, and it makes us sell more and more. And that was the thing with chemicals that were in the tobacco. And even it wasn't so much the tobacco as it was that they had 66 different man-made materials in the tobacco.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't bad enough that it was tobacco, which actually might not have been that bad.
Yeah.
But then anytime man gets involved in natural processes, it seems like it makes it like not healthy. That's why they say, where you shop, you need to go like on the perimeters and get the things that are whole and refrigerated, and not the processed and canned. And
oh yeah, like I going through, my dad had a really bad health scare in the end of March, beginning of April, and he's had to completely change his diet. So knowing, not getting the canned foods because that's full of sodium, or getting the freezer foods because that's also full of sodium, and really reading labels and understanding like what his body needs to heal it's crazy, and it's almost like you can't buy those in the store anymore.
it's very difficult to live healthy. It's unfortunate. I hope that gets turned around. But the guy that lived the longest in the United States was 110 years old. I forget his name. I used to know it. But this was actually a People magazine talking about him. And his wife lived to be like 104, 105. And one of their revelations that they knew early on that they shouldn't be drinking out of plastic or using plastic things. Well, now we know that on a weekly basis we consume about a credit card size of plastic. These are like microplastics, and they're like hormone disruptors and mimickers. So they do a lot of. But even our canned foods, or our canned sodas or things, they're lined with plastics, and even our styrofoam cups. And then if we think about, we drink hot coffee out of a plastic lid and things. So we're dislodging things that are plastic, which aren't meant to be in our body. But and then these are part of that almost forever chemicals that there's things that we really we're going to have trouble getting rid of. But one of the marvels of our body is that, if you have channels that can detoxify, like your liver, kidney, skin, lungs, all this, if that's working, a lot of times you're getting rid of that stuff. But sometimes they're not, and they're accumulating, and they turn into some real big problems. But
yeah. So I have one last question for you. All right. So where do you think that your field is headed in the future?
Well, it's a hope of mine that my kids will enjoy much more acceptance than what I've come through. So I think that what I'm talking about, which might sound marginal and fringe because it's not I think that's going to turn around, and it's going to be more than mainstream. I think when people start having their own revelations. I mean, we have a small tribe that see it in a different way, and they're kind of got off that bus that's going, and they're kind of thinking for themselves. And I think the opportunity of like some of the information that's available to us all is going to make us think about how can we empower our bodies to be its best, and that there's an innate ability of our body to do this, that it was designed. I mean, life is powerful. Life, somehow cracks through the cement, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And somehow, even despite what we just talked about, all the chemicals in our environment, all the negativity, somehow we survive, and we find a way. And so I think we'll have to think a little different, and we might have to think like even like Dave, you have to like live like no one else so you can live like nobody else. You might, in other words, we might have to start writing this. We've had some people in our office that have changed their diet radically, and you can just see a ripple effect of how a mother changes her diet. Her desire was to feel better, lose weight, but her husband was affected in a positive way. Her kids were affected. Maybe the kids started packing their lunch to go to school, and people notice they're packing their lunch and going to school, and so other people are packing their lunch too because they can eat healthier. And teachers notice that, so now they're bringing in microwaves, and so that people can bring in their own food and healthier foods and feed themselves. And so this beautiful ripple effect that might start as a grassroots thing, I think could overcome like billions and billions of dollars of propaganda that makes us want to stay stuck in a mindset that it hasn't worked and continues to not work, and get back to our old beautiful expression of our full God-given expression of health and vitality.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
Well, I think we brushed on a lot of stuff, didn't we?
Okay, yeah.
And I brought in things. I think I covered that. I brought material to share with you about studies that have been done about how our bodies affect our brain. And so if anybody wants those, we put them in show notes or something. So if anybody want to access information about that, the integration of body, soul, spirit, they did that kind of well in Eastern medicine and in the 5 elements. So we find a lot of times things fit into that, and so a lot of things we poo-poo in our culture. I think there's a lot of merit to those that we're going to learn, and that expressed that we're just not a hunk of meat, but we just are body, soul, spirit, and trying to have our best journey.
All right. Well, thank you so much again for taking time out of your busy schedule to sit down with me. And I truly appreciate everything that you do for our community.
Thank you, Martha. You too.
Well, that's all that I have for this episode. A big thank you to Dr. Hutsell for taking the time to sit down with me. Next month, I'll be sitting down with Dan Slavin to talk about the Nappanee Historic Preservation Commission. But before you go, be sure to subscribe to this podcast, hit like, or leave us a comment.